Okay, corresponding parts in a congruence. So let's review first. What does it mean to be congruent? That means you are the same size and the same shape. So things that are congruent have the same size and the same shape. Okay, so in this example, we're going to look at two congruent triangles here. I'm going to say that triangles ABC and DEF are congruent. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, it means they've got the same shape, so that must mean the corresponding angles are congruent. If you're the same shape, then this angle here, this triangle, oops, even if it's a little smaller here, the angles are going to be the same. That angle is the same. This angle on top is the same. This angle on the right side. Okay, so the angles are congruent. And if they're the same size, that means the corresponding sides are congruent. Okay, so now if you line these sides up, they're all congruent. So to put this all together, congruent triangles, two triangles are congruent if and only if corresponding parts of the triangles are congruent. Okay, so when you say corresponding parts, you're talking about a lot of things. You're talking about all the corresponding angles, and you're talking about all the corresponding sides. So if they're congruent, you've got congruent triangles. Now here's how we're going to label it. I know that angle D here is congruent to angle A, so they get that marking. E and B are congruent, so they get two of them, indicating that those two are congruent. F and C, those are congruent, so those get those marks. Now the sides, this side congruent to this side, they get the one hash mark. Bottom congruent to the bottom, they get two, and that third side with the three hash marks. Now it doesn't matter which one gets one, which one gets two, and which one gets three, as long as the corresponding sides or angles get the same amount of markings. Okay, so that's how we label it on the diagram. How do we say it, or how do we write it down? Well, we would say triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. Now this is important. I said A, first I said A, then I said B, then I said C, in that order when I wrote it out. I have to do that again. I have to first put this corresponding vertice, then this one, then this one. So I have to write it as being congruent to triangle, oh, I just messed up, being congruent to triangle DEF. Okay, because now this is actually going to tell me a lot. Here's an example. Let's say that triangle XYZ is congruent to triangle ABC. Well, because I wrote it that way, I know that these are corresponding vertices. So I know that their angles are the same too. I know that angle X is congruent to angle A. And I know that side XY is congruent to side AB. I know all this because I know that if I have congruent triangles, that means corresponding parts of the triangles are congruent. So if I have two congruent triangles, triangles XYZ is congruent to triangle ABC, then I know the corresponding parts of the triangles are congruent. And our reason for this, we can write these statements down like this: these angles are congruent and these sides are congruent, because corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruents. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. And if you don't like writing all that out, there you go. CPCTC. So when we start using this in our proofs, if you like writing things out, that's fine. Write out corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. If you're going quick, you want to save yourself a little bit of time, CPCTC. Okay. And one last little nugget of information here. You can have congruent polygons too, as long as all the vertices match up and all of the sides and all of the angles are congruent. Now we're not going to see a whole lot of congruent polygons this chapter. We're going to see a whole lot of congruent triangles. But just so you know, this will come up. It's the same statement. It's an if and only if biconditional statement. But two polygons are congruent if and only if their vertices can be matched up so that their corresponding parts are congruent. Okay? That's it.